Thank you and welcome to the show for today. This morning on Perspectives, I have Kennetha Patterson and Teresitta Jones here to discuss the Tennessee public housing crisis. We are discussing these ladies' backgrounds, educations, and ultimately the impact that they seek to leave on Tennesseans through this education about this crisis. So ladies, I want to thank you for coming to the show this morning. And just to get started, I want to talk baby years. So Ms. Kennetha, tell me just those baby years and introduce yourself.
Good morning. So very happy to be here. I'm Miss Kennetha. I go by the homeless CEO Patterson. It's a reason I go through about that name. So you'll hear about that throughout my story. But my childhood years, I could say kind of a chronological time frame. I remember being born with a monitor in my head. Of course, I remember by pictures, but I remember that being my first battle, and I'm meant to be like a rebel and battle through this life, looking back in retrospect at that. So, and I am the grandchild of a pastor over 40 years here in Nashville, Tennessee, and Springfield, Tennessee. So grew up in the church, and I had to find the Lord for myself, and just being a 5-year-old that was, I would say, S8, you know, that was a part of the enemy trying to steal my future and purpose that is coming about now. It's all full circle. So that's how my year started out, kind of going through that journey and, you know, just becoming, because from age 5 to 24, I dealt with being real mean. You wouldn't even understand how mean I was a fighter then. So about 24 years old, I found my church home, and I was delivered from what happened to me as a child. And so I really find along my path people just like myself that happened to. And later on, I found out my purpose was housing, along with those things that really encompass the whole family. So that's kind of what my background is. And it all came from really literally the baby and growing up and coming into who I am now. So
Miss Teresitta, those same baby years.
Yeah, my baby years. It's kind of different because I don't remember my baby years. I just know I lived in a generation to where you had to be in before the street lights came on. And you know, if you got in trouble at school, everybody was getting you before you even made it home. So those was my younger years. I really didn't. My mom was in the streets, you know, so therefore, you know, it led to other things and stuff like that. I had my first daughter when I was 14, so I've been a mom since I was 14. So my younger years was survival. That's what I want to say my younger years are.
And ladies, I want to talk kind of those adolescent years. And this is before we get into y'all's early experiences with the housing, because that's a loaded topic. But lady, I want to talk about what kind of those teenager years, let's say 15 to 18, what that looked like for you ladies. And Miss Kennetha.
Actually, I'm ready for that one. Wow. So there is kind of my high school years. And to be honest, I went through those years. I'm kind of like Miss Teresitta said, I was a teen mom as well. I had my first baby at 17 years old. And along that time, I was in high school. I went to every high school in Nashville, just about. I went to Pearl Cone. I went to Stratford, which was the one I left from. Maplewood was my first school. I was in cosmetology, and anything to do with ethics, that's where I made 100 in cosmetology and ethics. The rest of the subjects, you could kind of throw them out. But that says a lot about me. And after I had my baby, I think I ended up having another baby at 18. So back to back, I called them Irish twins. It's a girl and a boy. And so at the time, I went back to Pearl to get my hair done because I was getting emancipated. This big fancy word, a lot of people don't even really know, but that was for me to get my, so to speak, project, right? And so when I went to do that, first of all, the teacher saw me. She said, I know you don't got no regret. And she threw her keys at me, which she often did it to us. She was real. And that was like, you know, it kind of made me feel a type of way with that person. And, you know, it was, she genuinely cared. And she was like, hold on, wait a minute, what just happened here? And so she gave me that mama vibe. But in essence, I ended up getting my GED in 3 weeks. Once I ended up, even with the 2 babies and everything, and I ended up going into the medical field really after that. And I went through a lot of things. I learned then I was not meant for brick and mortars, and I was meant for an entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, over the years. And so that's kind of how I landed here. And I remember evictions with my mom and stuff growing up. So I saw back then how mean they were about it, but I've also seen how it has evolved.
And we're going to pick back up on that in our second segment. And Ms. Teresitta, your later adolescence, and we're going to lead into both of you ladies' early experiences with public housing, specifically in Nashville, Tennessee, under MDHA. And we're just going to talk about those experiences. These are personal experiences. This isn't anything we've read, written.
It's factual.
This is lived experience. And I encourage our viewers to tune into the second segment of Perspectives, where these ladies will be discussing the Tennessee public housing crisis. Welcome to the second segment of the show for today. For viewers just tuning in, I am host Alana McLaughlin, and you are watching Perspectives. This morning on Perspectives, I am discussing the Tennessee public housing crisis. I have Ms. Teresitta Jones and Ms. Kennetha Patterson here to discuss their backgrounds, their educations, their upbringings, the impact that they seek to leave on Tennessee through their experiences and through their work, and ways that we can support them. And ladies, we're hopping right back in. Ms. Teresitta, tell me about just kind of 15 to about 18, those teenage years.
Okay.
And especially with a baby.
Yes, I was 14 with a baby. My first job was Miss Winters. I loved that job.
We miss
$5.15 an hour. I thought I was making all the checks. But my mom wasn't taking care of no other children, but me, because she lived on a time, well, you had your kids, you take care of your kids. So it led into my household as well. I was her only girl. I didn't have the best upbringing or anything, but I can honestly say, being a teenage mom at 14, those daycares helped. So when they had those daycares, that's what helped. I actually graduated as a teen mom as well too. So that was my
Kind of
right
early,
there.
yeah,
that was my
teenage
little early right there.
And ladies, now we're getting into, I want to talk about early public housing experiences. And like we said off camera, this could be positive or negative. I think of some of the positives of public housing. I think of, you know, the sense of community. You're surrounded by people. If you need some sugar, you got sugar right here. If you need your hair done, you go upstairs. You need a plate, you go downstairs. But then on the same token, there are the cons of it. Overlooked communities. People packed into buildings that are too small or too outdated. And this is just a few of them. But ladies, I want to talk about some of the early, Miss Kennetha, I want to talk about those early experiences.
Ooh, as you were talking, my wheels was turning, but my first experience going into public housing was really, I honestly dumbed myself down. I thought I couldn't be as smart as I was going in. I didn't know that at 17, but looking back, I could tell that. But I ended up meeting, just kind of how me and Miss Teresitta came about. The Lord placed the best women in the proximity of me, and I was really going through mental health wise then. I had this one instance where it was kind of like flipping a rod. And I had this whole episode, I was yelling and screaming, and it was just one little simple thing that set me off. But it came from the environment of, I used to call the public housing brick coffins, is what I called it, because it felt like that the bricks would sweat. It would be, you know, we'd have to have air conditioning in order to keep the house cool. Just different things that were so depressing about the place. And then on top of that, I ended up, like I said, I continued my education, but in the midst of that, the landlord told me if he could raise my rent up any more, he would. It capped out at like maybe $600 I was paying staying in public housing, and I think I was making like $17 an hour then at I was triaging for donor services, believe it or not. Very interesting. I learned military time there, everything. So just interesting dynamic from, you know, the housing realm to the healthcare realm, which I honestly learned how those intersect now. Because mental health and your health care, being able to have stair steps out of public housing, that was not available. So once I did get out, that's when my eviction started to happen, because I had the money to do it. And actually my first place I was gonna purchase with my Section 8 voucher, this was back in maybe 2013-ish, and people were not talking about that back then. And the the landlord was ready to help me do that, but it just was a fear of mine, so I ended up going to an apartment complex. And in the midst of that, we ended up homeless 4 separate different times, different scenarios, but they were not stereotypical of I didn't pay the rent, I was being lazy. I never learned along the way how to stair-step out of public housing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that part.
That's that early. That's an introduction. And Miss Teresitta, that same introduction.
Okay, so for me, when it comes to public housing, my mom had public housing for us growing up. So, and I think sometimes in our cultures and stuff like that, we don't realize like that older generation, like our parents and stuff like that, they lived in public housing. They seen things that we didn't see. So for me, it wasn't that I was trying to get in public housing, but it was just something like that's what I knew. Like you have a baby, you turn 18, you go get your food stamps, you go to public housing. It was not a big thing to say, oh, go to school, go to college, and, you know, get you a career going, buy a home, all that. So for me, those things wasn't talked about. So when I did officially move in public housing, I was 18 years old. I met my husband. He moved me out of public housing. I did not go back to public housing until I was 30 years old. And that's only because, you know, life happens. You get older, you get the changing and stuff. I was actually homeless 7 years because no one was reading my charge that I had, in which it was just a basic little misdemeanor, but they wasn't reading it. So I was constantly getting denied for 7 years before I moved to where I'm at now.
And you know, we don't often talk about the fact that a lot of complexes don't give those second chances.
Yeah.
Whether it be misdemeanor, felony, or whatever the case may be, they see a record, they're going to the next tenant.
Yeah.
But then if you do that a million times, where do people who deserve a second chance go? And we're going to pick back up, and then in our final segment, we're really going to talk about the experiences that you all are having today with these complexes here in town, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about everything from shady practices to the leasing center has people who are legally not supposed to be working there, you know, conditions, the lack thereof, and ultimately we're just going to talk about ways that we can support these communities, ways that we can support MDHA and actually turn this into what it was purposed to do, to help families, to help rebuild, to be a safe and affordable option for people. And you know, a lot of people forget about that. Like under Roosevelt and Hoover, that's what this was intended for. This was supposed to be
regulations.
You know, to help people, families, parents, single parents, you know, young parents. And it was beautiful. They erect all these apartments in these little areas, and they give you these vouchers, and it sounds so good. But you look at 2024, half of, you know, the complexes and housing under, you know, public housing is astonishing. It's scary.
At base.
You'll be surprised.
At base.
At base, and then we're going to pick back up on that in our final segment, and I encourage our viewers to tune into the final segment of Perspectives, where we will be discussing the Tennessee public housing crisis and ways to support these communities. Welcome to the final segment of the show for today. For viewers just tuning in, I'm host Alana McLaughlin, and you are watching Perspectives. This morning on the show, I have Kennetha Patterson and Teresitta Jones here to discuss the Tennessee public housing crisis. In our first two segments, we discussed the ladies' early backgrounds, educations, and ultimately we're discussing in this final segment the public housing crisis here in Tennessee and ways that we can support these ladies and fight this crisis. Ms. Kennetha, this all started, you sent me a very detailed message on Facebook asking me to look into something going on around town.
Yes, ma'am.
And you know, I get these messages and I be like, boy, I don't know why these people treat me like I'm the Gail or Oprah. Cause I've been thinking, I'm like, boy, you know, little old me, what could little old me do? But I read your message and I said, little old me has to do something.
Wow.
Whether it's just talking about this on here, getting out into these communities, little old me had to do something. And so little old me did something, and we're here. Now, Ms. Kennetha, I want you to break down the story you told me, the experiences, and yeah, you're getting giddy, Miss Teresitta. Because it's something to be told.
Wow. Yeah, and I really do appreciate you, Miss Alana, for actually hearing us, because that is something that is missing in this city. And I am the Consumer Advisory Board chair for the COC that is attached to HUD here in Nashville, Tennessee. And finally, we had to fight behind the scenes a long time to get where we are today, where we're breaking through and actually thankfully, people like you help us get the story out, and we have been rejected a lot as well. So that's what the story is. It's like,
by local
Again.
stations, mind you. Like, I mean, but seriously, I won't call no names, I won't finger point,
Yeah,
but
we won't.
seriously,
Yeah.
a lot of
Definitely.
entities here in Nashville did not want to touch this, and I get that it's touchy,
Yeah.
but some things need to be touched.
and it goes
Yeah.
back into piggybacking off of what I said before. Ethics is my thing. I could have been honor roll in ethics, and just the morale with me being a homeless planning commissioner as well. I could not see or hear, even though when you hear the Skyview story, you don't necessarily think homelessness, but it is a whole homelessness prevention situation. Because starting out, I've been calling Skyview Ground Zero because it's the first complex. It's up on the hill. It's in the capital of Nashville, Tennessee. And to me, honestly, Nashville, Tennessee should be ashamed of ignoring us. We reached out to several people. Miss Teresitta had already been reaching out to people. I had been
You guys
reaching
mentioned
out
emailing over
after
70 people.
yeah, and this is gonna be your federal people, your state, your local state representatives came and stood in the midst of us before the historical 60-year remodel. That should not even be a statement. And to say that it's 87 more apartments that are in ruin that need help, and people have literally died there.
Yeah.
People have, it's elderly that's very sick that can't even, utilize their apartment. To me, appropriations are needed. We've asked for access. We've asked to sit down with the mayor's office. I know he just gave his state of address yesterday, but it's like, to me, all I keep hearing is transit, and I keep hearing, tourists. I keep hearing green space, which is things that Native Nashvillians and people that have been here and pushed out should be able to enjoy as well. And no way should it be. When we found out, we ran up on the council people. We had to do a run up. And when we did, we found out how a planning meeting had happened, and the public is supposed to be aware of that.
Right.
And they were not made aware. To me, what came from that meeting, it should be reversed. Because just like these evictions that are no knock, and the sheriff just showing up at the door and putting people out. I have one person right now that's homeless. She's living in a park literally with a critical illness. I'm reaching out to shelters, and they're like, well, she's not in the hospital, so therefore we can't do anything unless we have a referral from the hospital. And I'm like, she's literally terrified that she's gonna be paralyzed if she doesn't get off the street. And I've had more than one person tell me, if I get put out, we prevented eviction. Go to court with people, with what I do and everything as an advocate. And this one lady, she was like, I'm gonna die if I get put out on the street. I'm literally gonna get out there and die. And so you hear that a lot, even with Section 8 vouchers, you hear people on the waiting list die. And to me, hearing that, and I'm a very empathetic person, ethical, morale again. So at the core of my heart, to know people are dying from being homeless or not having a home, it infuriates me. So just meeting Miss Teresitta, and the way we met was just like, oh my gosh, like you said, using the power of social media. I actually learned that in DC. I just went to a big conference, and one of the teaching sessions was talking about the power of social media. And so me and Teresitta just kept on, tag teaming at it and speaking about it out loud. And that's the thing, people are scared of retaliation. They don't want to speak out, so it makes it look like you're only speaking by yourself, when really it's all these people behind the scenes. Like we said, the sex offenders entering homes with children. No way that should ever be. No way it should ever be that we can't grievance what's going on with these situations, or be able to reach out to these entities. That's another thing. People don't know who their caseworkers are, what type of vouchers they have, what the vouchers give. Home ownership is attached to this, but we're not able to utilize any of this because of access issues and them ignoring us. So
Teresitta,
Yes, it's
I'm
bad.
looking at you like,
yeah, I ain't even mentioned legal aid yet.
Yeah, because for me, it's like, I've watched my mama do this.
Yeah.
And I have did research on this way before this situation. I even got loud about this situation. I've been
Right.
fighting my apartment complex for 4 years. And I reached out to so many people. And what I noticed here in Davidson County, all the higher ups that we reached out, everyone keep telling us the same thing. We know, but y'all have called so many people, we don't know what to do. How y'all don't know what to do, and this is our housing right.
No.
It doesn't matter if you live in public, affordable, or Section 8 housing. Somewhere along the line, they forgot the steps after public housing. You get what I'm saying? Because why am I spending $600-700 if I have a set income? Just say I bring in $943 SSI. Why am I spending half of that on a light bill and rent? If
That makes no sense.
yeah, it doesn't make no sense. And like, this was like literally the last month I stood firm on. I'm not paying a $551 light bill that y'all was supposed to pay in the midst of all this. But you're gonna tell me you're not gonna pay it. So if you're not gonna pay it, my lights get cut off and I'm gonna be homeless. Because per your rules in HUD, if my lights get cut off, I'm in violation of my lease.
Wow.
So it's
and you know,
really crazy.
something as simple as that, people
triggers.
outside of public housing forget to pay their light bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, now granted, like I stay pretty on top of my NES, but I be on the day sometimes.
Right.
So to know that somebody would just pluck me up out of my home and tell me, oh, well, you gotta go.
Because you couldn't pay a light
Yeah.
bill. And the light bill was from them doing the remodel.
Yeah.
Or something like during the snow where everyone's was upticked.
I feel like they put it across everybody when that
Yes.
happens, honestly, in communities. I've seen that happen, and it was like $1,000 light bills before, and I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
I just see things and I see patterns. And so I'm like, just with what is going on, there's a lot of stereotyping the tenants, even down to, remember, Consumer Advisory Board, I'm the chair of, we go to the contributor every month, every last Wednesday of the month at 9:30 a.m. So with that being said, the tenants there, which they are houseless, and they were like, what about the mayor coming to see about us? Why doesn't he want to see us? Or
Yeah.
what's wrong with us where we can't be treated as humans as well? So
I always do that thing.
yeah, and I wanted to give a shout out to the U.S. Senate candidate. Pamela Moses has really
Yes.
been there for us, and My Brother's Keeper Outreach Ministries, Zeal Outreach Ministries. They have stood behind. I know Zeal was there for Teresitta beforehand, Mission 615. These are the people that have been, on the ground and actually standing behind us and supporting us, and kind of guiding along the way. And we always disclaim that we're not attorneys because we're not able to get help from legal aid, but we
Yeah.
end up having to be pro se litigants. And it's no way that I should know what that word means.
That's not
Like
enough.
most people don't know what that is, but
Yeah.
And ladies, I hate that we're running out of time, but I want to thank you for
Yes.
bringing
Yes,
awareness
thank
to
you.
these issues. And I want everyone to connect with Teresitta Jones and Kennetha Patterson, the homeless CEO. And I want people to continue to further these ideas and to talk about the public housing crisis in Tennessee. And to my viewers, I thank you for allowing me to share these stories, and I thank you for humbly supporting these ladies and supporting myself. Thank you and good morning.